Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Dentist Show. We are live on Facebook. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Dentist Show. I hope that everybody can hear me nice and clear. Please let me know where you are watching me from. Okay. Hi, everybody. I hope everybody's well. It's good to see you. It's Sunday and it's Social Sundays with Denta, where we talk about issues that affect our community. And today is a very hard topic to discuss, but it's one that we must discuss. And so I just want to know where you guys are watching me from today. Say hi. I hope that you're keeping safe. It is still COVID-19, guys. So please don't forget to wear those masks, to wash those hands, and to social distance as much as possible. So let me go over to I've got Uncle Safo, my uncle watching me from Saudi Arabia. Hello, Uncle Safo. Good to see you. Summer PK, Western Goddess. Thank you so much for watching the show. Guys, please remember that if you are watching us on Facebook, please do a watch party with friends and family. These are issues that matter in our community and we must discuss and make sure that the word goes out. If you are watching me on Facebook, on YouTube, however, please make sure that you share the page on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, and make sure you also subscribe. Before we delve into the topic today, again, as always, I must say a big thank you to our sponsors, World Remit. You can join over 5.7 million people worldwide who are sending money back home. It's the better way to send money back home. And so I will be sharing that link with you. You can get 3 free transfers when you use the Denta code, which I will share with you later on in the show. But today, and I also want to say a big thank you to Cassie's Classics. She has amazing shito, amazing all-purpose seasoning. Guys, go on the website and go and buy one. They are amazing. And again, to Vesta London Beauty for my lip glaze. Thank you so much, Vesta. Go on the website and grab one. Remember, we are supporting Black-owned businesses, and it's about time that we all support, purchase, and make sure that we are growing each other's businesses. Is so vital. And again, go on to the World Remit website and you can send money back home to a loved one. And then I must say a big thank you also to all my viewers each and every week for joining me. Today's, like I said, is a very difficult topic, but it's timely. As we've all heard, this young 27-year-old young Ghanaian girl that died in the US, who was killed by her husband, shot 7 times. And it's been difficult watching that video. There's so many things that go through your head when you watch that video. And so, and for me, actually, there was one auntie that I remember when I was growing up. After school, I would go to her house whilst my mum was working. So sometimes she'll pick me up from school or I'll walk to her house, which was just minutes from the school. And each time that I went there, she had bruises. Like she was lighter than me. And so you could see purple bruising under the eye, swollen eye. Each day there was something else. And you could tell that she always wanted to cover up. With makeup, with smiles and laughter, and also sometimes makes jokes about, her and her husband. But I knew that it wasn't right. Even when the phone rang, you could see there was something wrong. And so today I have 2 amazing people, young women, that have been through similar situations, that have decided to come on the show, which I'm so grateful for, because it was very difficult to get somebody to come and speak on the show about this topic. And also, I'm not forgetting the men, because there are some men as well that are in these type of relationships as well. And somebody said to me, Denta, you know, you need to find the men that are being abused. They're going through domestic violence as well. There are men that are facing these issues. And with the men, it's even harder for them to come out because they have to seem manly, you know. And so, again, we'll be looking out for these men and seeing whether they will come out and speak. But I want to know your thoughts on what is happening. I want to know if you guys have ever been through this as well. Today, we're going to be sharing a lot. I hope you've got your tissues ready because it's going to be emotional as well. But I just want to thank the ladies. And also, I've got an amazing doctor, Dr. Kankam, who's going to speak to us. She's a psychologist. Again, you know, just so that we can get a better understanding of why some of these things happen. She has years and years of experience of this issue. And so I hope that all of you are going to be able to get something from this. I hope that we will be able to touch one life, one person who may be going through this, that she's not alone. There are other people that have been through it and have gotten out of it. But I must read this from somebody from Facebook sent me a message. And I just want to get that and read that to you guys. Bear with me 1 second. So she was a lady that went through domestic violence as well and managed to get out. She said, my story didn't describe the torture I went through. If I didn't leave the house, he would have killed me. He took a knife and stabbed everything I had. The cops were shocked and told me he would have killed me. I felt I was going to die. That's why I hurried and left the house with my black eye and swollen face. I went through hell. Then she went on and said, imagine innocently taking a shower and just enjoying the water. And then unexpectedly, you receive a painful slap on your face and you open your eyes to pain. I cried and asked, what did I do? He said, you were fantasizing about another man. Thank God I left. This is a message that I got from somebody on Facebook. And it's difficult. Just her having a shower and her partner slaps her, thinking that she's fantasizing because she's enjoying the shower, that she's fantasizing about somebody else. Guys, these stories are real. And we're going to hear from, you know, Lynette and Mikko. I'm going to invite Lynette on. Hi, Lynette.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, sis. How are you?
I am awesome.
Thank you so much once again for joining me on the show. First of all, I want to know a bit about Lynette. What do you currently do? You know, tell us a bit about yourself.
Currently telework during this pandemic, but I do work for the government. I have for 21 years. Wow. Now. Yep. I am a mom. I had two sons. I have one son. Now I'm a dog mom. I am married to an absolutely amazing man. And I live in Maryland.
Okay. So I know you just mentioned you had two sons, but what happens? Your child still alive or?
No.
What happened?
3 years ago, this is 2020, in December 2017, and that goes along with this whole domestic violence. But in December 2017, my son committed suicide.
Wow. How old was he?
20.
Okay. All right. So let's start from the top. Okay. I know it's very difficult, but I want you to start with how it all started. Like when did this all start?
Wow, a long time ago. So I was married, my first husband, and we were young, like 20, 21. And I don't know that we were quite emotionally ready. I know that we both had a lot of growing up to do, a lot of maturing to do, but he started exhibiting signs even before we got married. Just being aggressive, back then in the day, being controlling, obsessive. Back in the day, you took that as, oh, he just, he wants to be with me. Oh, he doesn't want me to be with anybody else. And while that was true, it was signs back then, and you pass them off. You're young, you're immature. And then as we got married, and I figured, oh, well, you know what, he'll grow up once we get married, he'll mature, I can change him. And so we ended up getting married. I was pregnant at the time, so he wanted our son to have his last name, and we ended up getting married. And the little pushes and shoves became more. After we got married, it was more verbal than physical in the beginning. I know I had my son the day before my father's birthday, and he was my husband at the time. He didn't show up until the hospital. He dropped me off that morning and then left. He didn't show up again until almost 11 o'clock. My son was born at 10:30. And then I ended up having to come home the next day. He was nowhere to be found. So a girlfriend had to bring me home. And then, when he finally got home, we got into it because I'm like, how dare you embarrass me? We just had a baby, and he hit me. And that was a wake-up call, because it was like I literally had a baby not even 24 hours ago. So if you would hit me now, I guess it was like, wow, okay, so I guess I probably should have paid attention. But I felt like I was in it, like, make the best of it. Now you have this baby. So, you got to do what you got to do. You got to grow up. And we went through life, and it wasn't as bad. I mean, bad is bad, but to me, it wasn't as bad. Just the verbal, you're not going to be anything. Nobody's going to want a woman with kids. You'll never do anything without me. So I was like, okay, maybe we need therapy. I'm that one. We can make this work. So we went to therapy, and it got better. And he ended up going into the military. And we ended up having to move away, far away, which helped. And I ended up getting pregnant again. And life was relatively good until he decided that he wanted to come back home and, do 4 years here. And I was like, no, I don't think we should do that. I think it's going to change. I think we'll go back to the way we were before. And we did, but it was just way worse. And
what do you think? What do you think was happening? I mean, you moved away and that things were okay. What do you think was there that was getting him to change back to his old?
I don't know if it was family or friends or whoever was in his ear telling him, well, she'll be there. She hasn't left yet. And even family members, would be like, come on, y'all can make this work. And I was like, yeah, but I'm not like. I watched a lot of Lifetime at that time, and all those movies were just of men who kill women. It was like, I just don't want to be a Lifetime movie. So, let me pipe down. Let me just stay out the way. Let me do what I'm supposed to do. Try to make him not mad, make sure I'm taking care of the kids so we don't get on his nerves. But it was just always something. If I looked at someone, or I had gotten into the federal government, and he was like, oh, who are you down there messing with? And who are you cheating on me with? And it was like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm just having a good time. Who you dressing up for? Now you looking different. And I was like, well, I work, so I have to be presentable. You don't have to go out the way looking like that. And I was like, you're immature and insecure. And why did I say that? Oh. That's just how I felt. But why did I say that? And we got into it. And I was like, oh my gosh, my kids are here. I mean, I've had my head thrown into our walls. It's been bad. And then the last time, I think the final straw, was it was regular conversation, and then he just got mad, and my kids were in the kitchen and we're standing there talking, and something about dinner. And I was like, no, I'm not cooking, because I work. And I was like, I'm not cooking. We'll figure it out, or we'll go out, because I'm not cooking. And he got, I don't know what was going on in him. Those words made him snap. And so he told the kids to go into the room. And I was like, I had gotten so used to it till it became routine. Some days were worse than others. Sometimes were much worse than others. But it was like, oh, here we go. Oh, this is it. And so when he sent the kids, I was like, okay, what? You gonna hit me? You gonna push me? What? And he took this gun that he had in his back pocket, and he put it to my head.
Oh my God.
And I was like, are you serious right now? I mean, so many things were going through my head. Like, okay. So again, I've watched enough Lifetime movies. Like, okay, so how do I get out of this? Like, my kids are in the other room, and then they came down the hall, and he was he's yelling for the lead, but by yelling, that made him nervous. And I was like, okay, just go down the hall. And he was telling me, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of the way you make me feel. And I was like, okay. And in that moment, you can say what you want, but for me, all I knew to do was pray. Because I don't know, I can only speak for me. I can't speak for your state of mind. So I was like, okay, God, how are we going to handle this? Because I don't want my kids to be orphans. I mean, the reason why I stayed so long was because I just didn't think that I had the means to take care of my kids by myself. So I did what I felt I needed to do to make sure that my children were taken care of, at least until I could figure it out. And I was like, let's talk. Well, no, I'm tired of talking. And I was like, okay. And in that moment, I was like, you know what? I have to go to the bathroom. I'll be right back. And so I went into the hall, and I closed the door, and I was like, okay. And I didn't have to go, but I was like, God, please allow me to go so he won't think. And I ended up having to use the bathroom, and he opens the door, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't even go to the bathroom in peace. And I'm like, God, just if you let me live through tonight, I promise I'm done. We'll figure it out. And he's talking, and I'm like, that's not funny. Like, this is not a scare tactics you use to manipulate people. And he was like, girl, you play too much. The gun is not even loaded. And I was like, that's not funny. He was like, look, the gun is not loaded. And so when he let go of the clip, it had no bullets in it. And I'm like, okay, but when he cocked the chamber back, the bullet popped out. And so I'm just looking, and he said, oh, I didn't even know that was in there. My bad.
Oh my God.
And I was like, my bad? Like, you're playing around, but in an instant, I could have been dead, and you would have went to jail, and I don't know who would have raised my kids. And I was like, yeah, you're a live wire. And so I could not leave. That was not anything that I could do that night, because I would have to have taken my kids. And I was like, okay, God, how keep me and my kids through tonight. I promise you I'm gone. I don't want to fight with him because I don't know his state of mind. If you just let me live through the night, tomorrow morning, I'm gone. I slept on the floor in our guest room. He didn't touch the kids. I put the kids to bed. They were fine. And I said, they were like, are you going to sleep in the room? No, I'm going to sleep in here so I can be right next to y'all. I slept on the floor, barely slept, writing letters to family members, thinking about how tomorrow's going to work, because I was like, okay, God, I prayed and I believe that you're going to honor my prayer. So tomorrow, hell, high water, no water at all, I have to get out of here. This is the beginning of the rest of my life. I don't know how it's going to work, but I know we can't keep doing this. And so when daylight finally came, I was exhausted. And I was like, I'm just going to get up and act like a regular day. I got up, I got dressed for work. I got my kids together, got them together for school. And then we left. I left and I dropped them off at school. I told him, see you later. He was like, I'm sorry, but you got to do better. And you make me do the stuff that I do. And I was like, okay, it was no point in going back and forth. I was like, okay, I hear you. You're right. And I left. When I dropped my kids off, I went straight to the police department and filed a restraining order and told them that he needed, because he was in the military at the time, that he needed to be out of the home before I would go back. And that literally was the end. I mean, it wasn't the end because we still have kids, and
yeah,
I lived to tell the story.
Yeah.
It's like anything I can deal with.
How was trying to act like everything was okay in front of the children?
Very hard because they ask questions. You know, what my youngest was like, why did you make daddy so mad? And I was like, like, how do you answer that to a 5-year-old and be honest? And I was like, I don't know. We're different personalities. My oldest one is an introvert, and he's just an observer. He's me. He just sits back and watches. And it was always, "Are you okay? It'll be okay." And it was like, I have to get out of this because I don't want them growing up thinking this is okay, because it's not. It's not. And it's funny because we had a conversation with a girlfriend last week, and she was telling me how she because my youngest would run away and just days he was disrespectful. He had become combative. And I was like, I just don't understand. And so talking to my girlfriend literally last week, she was like, yeah, I used to run away because her family, her mother was in an abusive relationship. And she was like, I said, why did you do that? She was like, I don't know. I mean, because I was like, why is she taking all of that? And it was like light bulb. I mean, 3 years after my son's death, but I finally got closure. Like, so you thought she was weak? And she was like, yeah, I mean, she stayed and took the abuse. And it was like, oh my gosh, like he thought I was weak. And I wasn't. I did that for them because I just didn't want to be homeless with 2 kids. And I just thought that staying there, because he was never abusive to them, it was just me. Wow. And I figured I can endure it. I'm okay. I'm grown. I don't want to be somewhere where I can't afford to take care of my kids and have them separated or have our situation way worse. So I just figured you'll stay in it until it gets better, or you find the wherewithal financially, mentally, spiritually to just leave, however long that takes. If that means that I stay in this until, the kids get grown and get out of school and go on their own. And then I decide, God forbid, if I'm not dead, okay, now I'm going to leave you. Then that was a choice that I had decided to make.
We're going to continue. There's Jamaica that's put something on the screen. She says, great topic. My friend's husband killed her and himself the day before she planned his abuse, which is just heartbreaking. We're going to continue with you, Lynette, but I want to invite Mikko on. Mikko Kelly, again, a survivor, to also share her story about her journey. Hey, Mikko.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you, sis. Thank you so much for joining me on today's show.
Thank you.
Again, first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you currently do, and where you are at the moment.
So my name is Mikko Kelly. I am a survivor. I'm actually an author. I wrote a book called Love Is Not Pain that I put out about 2 years ago. And it details cycles of abuse that I went through. I just found myself in several relationships that were abusive in the past. I'm thankful now that I am married to an amazing man. Just so thankful that I was able to break that cycle and to be able to get into a relationship with someone who is the total opposite of what I was used to in the past, and someone who loves me unconditionally. I'm truly grateful for that. We had 3 kids. I am a business consultant and an image consultant. And so basically what I do is I help women. I help women who, like me at one time, I wanted to start a business. a few years ago. I didn't know how to do it. I needed an investor, and that's what I do now. I invest in women and teen girls. I have this amazing program called the Teen Boss Academy, where I help girls between the age 13 and 18 start a business and maintain a business. I'm an author. I write books. I talk about the relationships that I had in the past, but most of all, I try to encourage people, you know, to even though I went through all of that, I'm a survivor. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a survivor. I'm an overcomer. So my goal is to just help and encourage women all over and men, because I know men go through abusive relationships as well, but to help people know that toxic relationships are awful and that there is a difference between real love and toxic relationships.
Absolutely, Miko. So let's go back into you know, your relationship, which was abusive, and how you dealt with that. Just tell us a little bit about that story.
So there were, I would say, at least three of the relationships that I was in the past. They were abusive. It either was physical abuse, financial abuse, mental abuse. One in particular that I talk about in my book is my son's father. He was physically abusive. He was mentally abusive as well, but he was physically abusive. When I was carrying my son, he didn't want to be a father again. At the time, I knew he had two children, but later on, I learned that he fathered maybe at the time I was pregnant, maybe he had about four children other than the one that I was carrying. So I only knew about the two girls, and I knew he was upset because, number one, we were like dating off and on. We weren't married. So in his eyes, it's like, I don't want to have another child, and we're not really together. He made a lot of excuses about why he didn't want to be a dad. But I made a decision that I wanted to have my son. I was trying my best to be a single mom. I was 21 years old in college trying to graduate, and also I had a dream to become an R&B singer. I was already singing in different studios. I had songs that were out on the radio at the time, but my focus after getting pregnant with my son was like, I want to be a mom. I want to do this. Even though I wanted to do music, it was like this beam of light in me when I got pregnant with my son. And to have this man who I thought, even though we weren't together, I thought he would be a stand-up person and, help me and be there. He just didn't want to do that. So
Hmm.
he basically tricked me when I think I was about 4 months, maybe 3 or 4 months pregnant, tricked me into coming over, telling me he wanted to talk about it and work things out and work through it. So I went over his home. We were talking upstairs, and downstairs in his home was a studio. And so he's like, you know what? Let's get some privacy because my dad and brothers are here. Let's go downstairs and talk. So I was like, okay. So he opened the door and I went to follow him down the stairs. He's like, oh, you go first. As soon as I took that first step, he just started dragging me by my neck down those stairs, down to this basement, this cold concrete floor, and just started slamming me on the concrete, kicking me in my
My
stomach,
God.
standing on my stomach. It was like, I'm just watching him try to destroy. He's just trying to kill my child, basically. And I'm fighting for my life. And it was just a struggle of us back and forth, back and forth. And at that point, he was able, to get me to a point where I just couldn't move. He was, a lot bigger than me. I couldn't move. And so he restrained me. He kept me down in that basement. And he basically was holding me hostage because he wanted me to make a decision to have an abortion. And I didn't want to do that. And he kept me down there
Wow.
for a few days. And I ended up having to fight, fight for my life, fight to get out of there. We ended up fighting again. And I found this I think it was like a little baby shovel. His dad was a construction worker. And I found this little shovel and I hit him with it. And I was able to escape, thankfully. And I'm running out in the street, trying to get a car to stop for me. It was like I just got to get away from him. And I was bleeding. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to lose my baby because this man is so determined not to be a father. Like it was just craziness for me to have to go through that. But I was able to escape. I was able. My baby survived. I'm thankful.
Amen.
He is 22 years old now.
Wow.
And I'm just so grateful that I never had an abortion. I'm grateful that his father wasn't able to do any harm to him. It was a struggle though, because after
Mhm.
that relationship, I kind of felt like I just didn't want to be with anybody because it felt like, is this how all of my relationships are going to be? And
Mhm.
then to go from that relationship after that, I ended up marrying a man who was just as abusive as he was. And so, like I
Wow.
said, my son is 22 years old now, and I look back and I think I'm just so grateful that my son, um, that he still holds me to a high regard, that he never um, gave up on me, that he did not take those traits from those negative people who were in his life. And he's total exact opposite. He's a perfect gentleman. He's kind, he's sweet. And he always tells me, he's like, Mom, I'm just glad that you were able to get out of that. Like I said, I'm married now to a man who's like the total opposite of what I went through in the past. And I'm just glad that I didn't give up on love and I didn't give up on loving myself.
Amen. Thank you. Oh my God. That is so you were locked up downstairs with him for how
Yeah,
many, like 2 days?
it was about 2 days. He had tied
And
me up at
throughout
one
that he
point.
was abusive to you. He was abusing you throughout those 2 days.
Oh yeah, he had burned cigarette on my arm. He had tied my hands up with this duct tape, like really, really, really tight, so I couldn't move. And he would just come in there and just stare at me and just ask me, "Are you ready? You ready to go and have the abortion? Are you ready? Have you calmed down yet? Are you?" And I'm like, "I'm not gonna do it." And every time I said I wasn't gonna do it, it was some type of pain inflicted on me because he was just determined not to be a father again. Just determined. It was like, I mean, and I kept telling him, I don't have to be with you. Go your own separate way. I will do this by myself. And he didn't want to hear that. He just did not want me to have this baby. And I didn't realize, like, I knew that he had two daughters, but I didn't realize that he actually probably had about four other children, maybe even five
Um,
children at that point when I was pregnant. So I didn't know. I just didn't understand why why he was so adamant to not for me not to have this child.
mm, 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 mm. I think before we continue, I'm going to invite Dr. on, Dr. Kankam. She is a psychiatrist, and she's going to give us another perspective. Hi, Doc.
Hi, thank you for
How are
inviting
you?
me.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm sure that you've heard the two amazing women and their stories of what they went through, but just seeing their strength, the strength that they had to kind of get out of that situation. But Doc, why do some women stay in abusive relationship even though it's toxic for them?
You know, First, Lynette, let me just say I'm so sorry about your son. And Mika, both of you, thank you for sharing this. It's not like we don't hear such heart-wrenching stories, even in the practice. I've been in practice for 30 years. And um, strength. There are many people I tell when they come and tell their story. At the time they come, they are coming because they are in a medical state, depression, anxiety. But the first thing after hearing their story, the first thing I remind them is you know you are a hero of your battle, of your war, because not everybody survives. So that's the first thing I want to tell both of you to always remember. Think you know you're a hero. And, domestic or partner abuse is present, it's all socioeconomic class, cultures, both sexes, but it's the woman that is happens to overwhelmingly, and the consequences, the injuries, and the result, the psychological consequences are greater. That's why it's a public health issue now. Why they stay. I think Lynette gave us a little clue. Even when they were dating, there was the pushing, there was the shoving, and the tendency is to say, you don't believe that this person you have fallen in love with can be this other person. And so you think maybe I can change the person. I think that's the first thing that we all need to remember, that even us changing ourselves, some aspect of ourselves that we think it's not helpful, it takes work, let alone changing someone else. You can change someone else because we act and we act and we speak our thoughts, and we don't have any control over someone else's thoughts. We don't even know what's in someone else's thoughts, so we can't change it. So those are some of the reasons. And Lynette gave the typical example. Maybe he will change, maybe this, and you give excuses because you love this person. That's why you marry them. And also because in certain cultures like our culture, you hear, somebody said that yesterday at another program, your grandmother or someone says, oh, everybody is like that. So sometimes even the people that you talk to, your family, would say, oh, no, this is not enough to break a marriage. And then there is that you may be weak. So it's all these misconceptions that people hear, and so they are even afraid to tell someone, or even too ashamed to tell someone, and they hope that it will get better, and it will get better, and it doesn't get better. Lynette, you said something that I want to address when you said, when you went away, it got better. And I thought to myself, what about that location got better? Abuse, this kind of abuse is about control. Maybe where you went to, there were not enough circumstances to trigger those things that would bring his issues up. So it was just there. But where you were, there were avenues. You went somewhere here, you went to A, B, C. Maybe there was only one A. And so it was that it was still there. His triggers, he didn't have enough of his triggers. He was still the same person. So when he came here, circumstance right, same thing. He hadn't changed. Nothing changes unless we work on changing. So that's and many, you say, why do people even go through that? Now, sometimes some you don't know, and you don't know what to do. But Mika, like you said, that you went through recurrences. So it has become a pattern. Sometimes the choice, the same set of values with which you made the first choice is the same for the second one, unless something else happens and the values changed. And so while you went through the first abuse, another and another, so it's even as a physician hearing all this, it was difficult to hear both of you. And let me address, the children, if I may. Is it okay to address the issue of the children? When you said he never abused the children, and I wrote down, no, he was abusing the children, because he may not have physically abused the children, but
mentally.
When we say, for example, the definition of post-traumatic stress disorder. It's not just that you are in it, you experience it. Sometimes witnessing someone close to you and helpless about it, that in itself can trigger. So your children were being abused mentally all the time. So that's, in terms of why do people stay? Nobody wants to be abused, but that becomes the learned helplessness. You don't know what to do. And that's where you are. And changing is not easy. But that's why we're discussing, because hopefully these programs are to discuss that, not to get there. Both of you were just lucky. Many people did not get through, but in same circumstances lost their lives, so that the flags, that the sign, even before dating, to say the pushing, the shoving, the verbal, it's not okay.
Yeah.
It's not okay. But Doc, when is it the right time to leave? Because like Lynette said, she tried counseling. They were going through all that process, and she was still hoping and praying that everything was going to be okay. When do you know when it's the right time to leave?
Okay. So Lynette, since you did counseling, when you said it changed, again, I said, what is it? What changed? You say sometimes it's like one of you said, sometimes it's better than before. And so you say that it has changed. I don't know how long counseling is for, but it ends up, when two people come for counseling, usually it ends up, you have 3 sets of counseling sessions, because each person, we are all a product of our gene and our life experience, and each person is different. So even when 2 people come, it ends up that we say each person needs their individual counseling sessions and then the joint. Because sometimes, abuse begets abuse. Some who have experienced abuse were in abusive relationship, abused as children, witnessed abuse, or had some experiences that make them feel like it's okay to accept this. So it's giving you the strength individually, to make sure that there's a line if it happened, because counseling, marital counseling or joint counseling, the goal of the counselor is not to put you together. That's not their job. The goal is to clarify communication, see what can change, but to strengthen each person. Sometimes the outcome of counseling is, no, this is not working. And you see it because it's giving you, it's almost like your lens, it's wiping your lens for you. So at the point where it's danger, definitely both of you have got to that point. It's more of what to do about it. And one of the things that we as health professionals, not just mental health professionals, being encouraged to do is to start the conversation. Because I'm sure all of you had primary care physicians, you had your OBGYN, you had, you were either midwives, OBGYN, you go, and it should be part of the history taking. It should be part, how are you doing? How's your life? And we are trained and retrained in detecting not just what is said, but what is not said, to be able to talk about it, because it's not easy when one has been, especially not just the physical abuse, the emotional abuse, that you can even speak up. So that we encourage to speak up and then offer, what are the resources? And there are many resources, so that's something that that we need to step up. because the person who is abused, the physical abuse, you could tell when you said you were tied you and you couldn't do anything. Sometimes it's the mind, it's the will, it's because it's up there. Sometimes it's difficult for people to see, but everything we do, we have to first work it in our mind. I am going to do this. And when that has been beaten down, and it's easy to say, why didn't you leave? Yes, for a mother, my children. And those are the reasons that some, studies have found that mothers said, oh, my children, even though those children also get affected, either they're withdrawn in school. Some people, some who already, a 12-year-old starts bedwetting again. Some little things again. School also, it's about the whole society coming together. School, noticing little things, because it's not easy. People are threatened, and as you said, sometimes it's financial threats. And realistically, you have nowhere to go. So leaving, it's easy to say, why didn't you leave? But we need to help.
Yeah, definitely. Lynette, I mean, did you ever, I know your son committed suicide at the age of 20, but did you ever see any signs that he was impacted by the abuse that you were going through? Was there anything that you felt you could have done?
I don't know if there was anything more I thought I could have done. I know he was very angry, and I knew the why, but his dad and I, we stayed in court because I was just like, maybe you need to take him so he can be with you, because that was all he wanted. He wanted to go live with his dad, and his dad, well, I'm gonna come get you, I'm gonna come see you, and then never show up. And it was so overwhelming. I mean, just the mental abuse that he put them through as he got older. And I would have conversations with their dad, like, you got to stop. You are making them what they're becoming. They're becoming angry. They're becoming bitter. DRA's having some mental health challenges he didn't have respect or trust in men. Until my husband now, but it was years that we went through, and I would take him to therapy. We went to therapists, we did mentors, I put him in different athletic programs, but he was always mad at me. It was like every time something happened, if dad didn't show up, it was because what did y'all argue about? Why did you get mad? Why did you make him mad? Now he won't come see me. And so I ended up having to, summers, it was like, okay, this is your time. I'll give you your child support back. I'll bring them to you. I felt like I overcompensated all the time so he would know it wasn't me. And I mean, at first, it was like, I was just angry. The first time when I first left, I was just angry. I was mad. I was like, how could you do this? You have kids, like your kids are going to become who you are. And so my family member had to tell me, just stop. They'll learn if he continues to be who he is, they'll learn on their own the pattern. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to beat him down. You don't have to talk bad about him. They'll learn. Just be quiet. Just do what you're supposed to do. And that took me years because I was bitter and because I was hurt and because it was like he had moved on. And it was like, you beat me. But after a while, I literally had to realize that hurting people hurt people. And so while I think that you moved on and, you live in life, it was like, no, I now feel sorry for you because you're going to always be who you always were because you don't think that you're the problem. And so now I just have to work on my son. And because he was I think he took a lot of his dad's anger out on me because I was the one there. I was there. And so in the last couple of months, he ended up having to come live with me. And we were able to really talk about some things. He was able to just be honest and be transparent and let me know that it wasn't me, that he now sees. And while that was comforting. I mean, to a certain extent, because it was like, that's all I wanted you to see was that I tried. While I don't care for your dad that much, that has nothing to do with your relationship with him, because I've always had my dad. And I think those relationships are special. So I've always wanted you to have a relationship with your dad until you decide otherwise, once you get grown. And him coming to those last 4 months, he came to my house in July. So those last 4 or 5 months, we really got to repair some things. He got to be transparent. I got to be transparent because I was no longer talking to a child. I was able to now talk to my young adult son, and it helped repair some stuff. The fact that he absolutely loved my husband, it did my heart good, because I was like, I don't want him to be in a situation where he ends up hurt by someone or police because all they'll see is disrespect. And that's not who he is. He's just angry, and he doesn't know how to challenge or manage that anger. And so those last 4 months were actually the best for me, because while we still butt heads, because I had to realize that now he's a young adult. I can't treat him like he's 12 years old anymore. That's a learning process as a parent. You know, your son wants to tell you stuff, you don't always want to hear it, but it gave us a chance to be honest with each other, to be transparent. It gave him a chance to see what fatherly figure love is. I don't think he's ever had that. And because of that, he was so mad. I mean, just like mad at the world. And so it allowed me to see who my son really was, that he was not a bad kid, that he's not this bitter kid, he just hates the world. He just really needed help. He needed some help channeling his anger and getting to the root of the issue.
Yeah. And how did you know it was because of what you were going through? Did he even know? I mean, He
did. He left, he did leave a note, and it was gut wrenching. He said that he knows that I love him and that I did everything I can. Well, I talked to him. I literally talked to him. He was having some challenges, and I talked to him that morning, and then I left and went to a women's event, and his friend spent the night at the house. And so I told him to get up and have his friend move the car because I needed to leave. And so while I'm at church, I'm getting phone calls, like a lot of phone calls from a number I don't know. I finally answer it, and it's his friends saying that they're on their way to my house. DR's been leaving some disturbance messages on Instagram and social media. And I was like, okay, so I'll call him. And I called and he answered, which was very rare. And we talked, and he told me how, he felt like such a failure because on social media, all his friends have things, cars, money, clothes. They're doing so much better than him. And, they have relationships, and, he apologized for putting me through hell. And he was like, I know it wasn't you. And I'm sorry. And I was like, we can get through this. And I talked to him. I went outside and told my husband, I need you to go home. I need you to check on him. One, because my husband is a police officer. Okay. So I know that they are trained to handle certain mental health issues if this was indeed that extreme. And two, because of the relationship that they had. I know that even when we were home, if DR wanted something, he would come in the room and ask my husband. And I'm like, oh. I guess I'm kind of cool with it because this is what I wanted, but it kind of makes me feel away because, like, I'm mom and you don't even ask me. So it was like, okay. He was like, no, just look, be grateful for the relationship. So they had an awesome relationship. So I talked to him the entire time until my husband got home. And then he heard my husband come home. Okay. And then he cut the conversation short. So, and the note that he left, he apologized to us. He said that I know that you and Mr. D were the ones that loved me. And I was like, wow. And a lot of the note was about my husband. how he was like, you know what, you took care of me and you didn't have to. I wasn't your son. I was like, wow. I mean, just knowing how angry he was with like just male role models. He was so like, I don't have to listen to you. You know, you're not going to be there for me. And so to see the relationship with him and my husband, it was like, it was, while I am extremely hurt that it was cut short, I'm so grateful that it happened so that he would not have had to leave this earth without knowing love, like genuine, like this man really loves me. Like he calls me his own son. So yeah, those last 4 months were not enough, but they were better. I'm glad that I had them versus not. I'm glad that he had them.
Yeah. Doc, in these situations, how do you deal with the children? Because we tend to, it's not that you forget the children, it's not like Lynette forgot the children, but it obviously affects the children in a big way. How do women who are facing this situation protect their children?
I think Lynette, did the right thing. They were in counseling. Counseling is, it's a catchphrase. Sometimes it's, it's gone from having issues, mental health issues, to having mental health illness. And some have gone to probably, get to where they need not just counseling, but counseling and maybe a psychiatric evaluation, which brings us to where, mental illness is still the stigma of it. And so I'm not sure whether, the description of you were angry and you were still hurt. They are sometimes sorting out some of these things, still needs further evaluation. And sometimes when something is happening that obviously there was abuse, there was all these going on, it's assumed, oh, it's just the abuse, okay, where it may have evolved into an illness that's needed. Not saying that, he could have been saved. Sometimes, just like any illness, you can have hypertension and you still die from the complication. But I'm saying that let's not be embarrassed about going to see a counselor, a psychiatrist, both if you need it. But let's make sure that we know that the children, even though they are not physically abused, they are also being mentally abused. And you and the children are we're all victims. So it is how to get to someone who can help you get there. May I ask, Lynette, was there somebody on the outside that you could talk to through all this, that you felt that heard you?
No, I mean, I come from a religious background, so they didn't believe in divorce, and so I felt like I was in a death sentence, if I may. I mean, my friends, I found out weren't my friends because they were like, "Girl, you stayed. I'd have been left if I was you." And it was like, well, you're not. And I have kids, and I just started working. I need to make sure that my kids eat and have a place to lay their head. And so instead of judging me, you're just not helping me. I don't need anybody to talk about me. I know what situation I'm in. I know how bad it is. So, and then certain times it was like, you don't want the judgment. So you just don't talk. You don't want people to think you're weak. I just didn't want to be made to feel weak or like I couldn't do something, or that, the sign, you saw the signs, you put yourself in this situation.
And I think, thank you so much. And this is the message I think we'll be sending today, that those outside, some of the signs, there's no there's no overt signs. But when you see sometimes someone, they don't want you to come to their house anymore, subtle things that change. Start a conversation in a compassionate way. What's going on? I notice, Denta, you said your auntie, you would go and your auntie would have these telltale signs. Did anybody ask her what happened to you? I noticed this. This is what we are encouraging, to say. You notice this. I'm concerned about you. Not, you have to make it easy for the person to talk. And then in your aunt's time, there probably were not as many resources as there are today. So it's being able to tell the person, this is not your fault, okay? This is difficult, but there are resources to help. We can call, this number. There are 24-hour numbers, and the person wants to make sure they are safe. So you want the social services can help, because it's, am I safe? My children safe? Where do I go to stay, or what can I do? So we on the outside, we play a major role. You talk about the church. We need the church. Church has a role to play. It's not about faith or illness or faith or this abuse. It goes on. After all, the community goes to church. So church is representative of the community. So in the same way, please, churches, make it such that you can go talk to somebody and know this is all this education, know that it does happen. It does happen. This person who committed this atrocity was a pastor. That doesn't mean all churches are bad, but as the humans, and this then happens. So it needs to be discussed. This is an occasion to continue this conversation everywhere, to say, church members, talk about it, and it's not your fault. So it is difficult. You see the person, two ladies, beautiful ladies, see what you see on the exterior, but they were suffering, and the children, were suffering too. But there is help. That's the sad thing about mental illness and mental health. There are more resources, but there's enough people feeling comfortable enough to use the resources. And like I said, we also have to step up. We have to train more people, train the midwives, train teachers, train social workers, to know that because this happened, it's almost like saying, now in the corona era, one is alert. You go to any place, you cough, okay, could it be this? So we are on alert. In the same way, let's be alert to our friends, to people we know. They are quiet. Let me say this: in my hospital, okay, every patient we see, we use electronic records. There are questions that if you don't click it, it doesn't allow you to go. You have to ask, have you had sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, neglect? It didn't just happen in the last, so it's encouraging. Even though it may be work for us, but if you don't click it, you won't move, because it's been recognized that this is a public health issue. So if it is any consolation that we ourselves are being made to be alert to this.
Doc, somebody's put, Glendon has put, domestic abuse by men affect the women in different ways. The men sometimes turn the abuse onto the children after they have left the abusive environment. Is this true?
He said the women sometimes turn the abuse onto the children. It's not, nothing is it's factual, or that it happens in every situation. However, remember, most women, or most people who have been abused, okay, they have risk of having depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, so a lot of mental health issues, which can manifest with, with anger, just like you said, the children got angry, okay, anger that is not controllable. So yes, it can be towards the children, towards anybody. Some people get abused and then they lose their job because as a result of the anger, they come to work and it's uncontrollable.
Yeah.
When emotions get uncontrollable, that's when we say it's become a health issue. And if you are coughing, your cough doesn't stop when you open your door and go outside, right?
Right.
So if it has become where there are mixed emotions, sometimes the abused person is angry at themselves also for why did you leave? Why did you do this? Why didn't you shut up? I mean, you're a human being. And so the anger is widespread. And just like she was describing her son, your child is doing something that you'll be angry with. It's being a child. The child is still a child who will behave like a child, and you are still a mother. So you are still controlling, you are still not controlled, but you still, if your child misbehaves, stop this, don't do this. And then it's like button heads, but it's still being mother and child. The point is, if things get out of control, whether it's yourself, children, please use the resources.
Mm-hmm.
As for the
Absolutely.
other person, let's know that you can't control them. You can, stop. If they could, sometimes we also know that sometimes there are psychiatric illnesses that, you know, that people have a risk factor of being abused or being the abuser. So there's a cycle that goes on. And I'm glad that your son has, in the last couple of months, you know, been able to vent and talk about these things, but still encourage to go talk to somebody if they need to. Because one of the things is the stigma of mental illness. So people don't go.
No, I
It
think
doesn't, it doesn't,
the child that she's talking about is the one that committed suicide. So the last 4 months, she was saying that they were able to share more. You know,
okay.
they got a chance to kind of reconnect, right, Lynette? Like,
Mhm,
and kind of
mhm,
almost
mhm, mhm,
bond again as
mhm,
a
Exactly.
mother and son
mhm,
for
mhm,
Exactly.
life. So I think that those were important. That was an important moment for you,
mhm,
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
because I think maybe it would have been worse if you hadn't gotten that moment, that final clarity
Yeah,
that he's not
yeah,
angry with
yeah,
me.
yeah,
He
yeah.
loves me and I love him.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm, mhm,
But were
mhm.
there moments, Mikko, that you wanted to take your life? Did you ever think, I want to end it as well? Why should I be here? Why should I be having this abuse? Did you feel any need at one point to take your own life?
I actually I went through a couple of phases of being very suicidal. When I was pregnant with my son, um, after I went through that situation with his dad, it was a point where I literally I had to talk to I didn't go to get professional help, but I'm glad that my sister was able to talk to me and just be an ear and let me vent because I felt like a failure. I'm like, I'm bringing this child into this world by myself. His father has not committed to being an active parent in his life. I was working at a I think I was a cashier at the mall. Even before that, I was a stripper. I didn't have anything. I didn't own anything. I didn't even have a car. I had nothing. And I felt like a complete failure. I'm bringing this child into this world. And I just felt like at one point I'm like, why am I doing this? I dropped out of school. I don't have anything. I don't have anybody. I don't have a husband. I don't have any help. I had stopped talking to my parents because I didn't want them. I didn't even want them to know I was pregnant. I don't even think they knew until I was 7 months pregnant because I was hiding it from everybody. And I felt like a failure. And thankfully, my sister, she was there for me because it was at one point where I didn't want to live. I didn't want my baby. I didn't know how I was going to survive. But thankfully, I'm so grateful. And even to this day, my sister has been my rock because I wouldn't have made it. I really wouldn't have made it without her support and without her love. And Lynette, when I'm listening to you talk about your son, my son has had mental health issues. And one of my biggest fears is that he gives up, that he makes a decision that he doesn't want to live. And not having that father who was there and who would help him with homework or even just be there as a friend, never having that father has really affected him. And like you said, with him having your son having that bond with your husband, I'm so glad. My son is the same way. You would think if you saw my son and my husband together, you would think that they were his son. You know, in the last 7 years, he's had this amazing man showing him how to be a man. At one point in my book, if you ever get a chance to read my book, there's one point where my son was angry at me. He was my boyfriend at the time, but he's like rebelling. And my husband's like, it's okay. He stands up there and he's like, hug me. He said, no, you're not my father. He said, yes, I am. And he grabbed him and held him and told him, you know, I am your father now. You don't have to worry about that man who wasn't there for you because I'm going to be here for you. And he has been for the last 7 years. And I'm just thankful because even though, you know, he has mental health issues, my son and my husband, it's like a bond. I'm so grateful for that because my son needed a man. He really needed a man to be there. I could love my son all day, every day, but having that man who will stand up and say, I'm your dad, I'll be your dad, I'm never going to leave you, and I'm going to help you push you through this has just been amazing. So I'm just grateful because, like I said, it was a point where I didn't want to live. And I'm grateful and so thankful that I was able to push through that because there was a point where I did not know. I just didn't know. I didn't think I'll make it to see. I'll be 45 in 2021. I never thought I'd make it past 25.
Wow.
I never thought I'd make it past 25 because there was one point where I was on drugs and alcohol, and my addiction to men and toxic things and people was the center of my life. So I'm just grateful. I never thought I'd see past 25. I never thought I'd see past 25. And to have a husband who looked past all of that, to know where I came from as a drug abuser, a liar, a prostitute, a madam, a drug dealer who looked past all of that.
Wow.
And loved me like God.
Amen.
That's why I get up every day and I fight. And I push myself because I know where I could have been.
Mhm.
And I'm grateful
You,
that I'm not there, that I made it.
Yeah.
you know
Margaret,
what?
thank you,
I was going to.
Mikko. You have no idea what you are doing by being on this show, telling your story. You are a queen.
Thank
And
you.
that's
Thank
from
you so
Margaret.
much.
Mhm.
Thank you. I love you. Thank you so much.
Lynette, was there moments for you as well that you felt like taking your life?
No, because I've just, so after that weapon situation, I would always ask God, like, why am I here? Like, what's my purpose? Like, why didn't you just let that happen? Like, what am I supposed to be doing here? Like, I don't have real girlfriends. I don't, and I was like, God, why not? Like, why? And God was like, you have to show yourself friendly. And I became closed. I put up so many walls. It was like, you don't know my story. You will not judge me. And so once I began to let down some of them walls, that took years of therapy. Like, especially after my son, I went through a year and a half of therapy every week, sometimes twice a week. And I realized we had to get to the root of some issues. My son was not a root to an issue. And once I got to that, I just wanted to know what was my purpose. Like, why me? Why did I have to go through all of that? Like, I know I've seen others, but it was like, I'm here for a reason. And what is that reason? Like, I feel like I've been to hell and back. I've looked death in the face and I'm still here. I've lost my son and I'm still here. Like, why? Just, my dad passed away. That was my everything. Like, why do you keep taking the men from me that mean the most? And it was like, what's my purpose? Like, why? And what's my motivation for being here? And I had to learn who I was, and that what people have said about me for years don't define me. I've let it define me because it would be family members and close friends. And so that became who I was. I was who they said I was. And so once I learned that I'm not, that I have my own personality, I'm not stupid, I'm extremely intelligent, that the men that I have chosen in the past does not define my future. It got better. I mean, it got to a point where I could talk about it without the stigma of judgment, without people, giving me the, I'm okay. And I'm okay in saying I'm okay, because I couldn't always say that. Like, so, it has taken years, it has taken therapy, it's taken God, it's taken getting out of my way and allowing myself to be transparent so I could have healing. Regardless of the judgment, it's going to be those that like you, it's going to be those that don't. It's going to be those that, want to take this journey with you, it's going to be those that don't. And learning that that's okay. It really is. It's okay. And so, yeah, I've even written a book, which is crazy because I do not like being in the front. I'm like, I just sit in the background. But it was like, if I could just help one child to not feel like they don't have any other option but suicide, or one mom to not have to sit in the front of that church and stare at her child's casket, it would totally be worth it to me. Because I've been there, and it is a horrible feeling.
Mm, mm.
Lynette, I have a question for you, Lynette.
Mm-hmm.
With your son, did his dad, I want to word this correctly, did he ever put any blame on you for your son's suicide?
No, directly. He would call, and he had gotten remarried and everything, and he would call a lot. He is not doing well. He is hurting because I found out with him coming here that my son passed away on a Saturday. That Thursday, he called his dad because he told me, he was like, he called me on Thursday. And I was like, wow, what did y'all talk about?
Right.
And he said, I was busy and didn't answer the phone. And I was like, wow. And while that hurt me, he's really dealing with it. And I was like, wow. I mean, he doesn't blame me, but he's very upset because my son's says a lot about my husband. And it says a lot about him. It says some things about him, how, I've never really felt loved. And I felt like you never loved me. You never. And so I chose to keep that note to myself. And his aunt, my ex's, their dad's sister, asked me, well, did he leave a note? Because that's not like him. He was a writer. I was like, well, I said no at first because I didn't know. And then my husband found it and was like, he did. And so I read it. And she asked me about a month later, so y'all never found a note? And I just not a liar. And I said, oh, he did. And she was like, well, what did it say? I said, well, that's not up for me to discuss with you. Well, did it have anything about his dad in it? Because I think you need to show. And I didn't want to because it wasn't nice. It was extremely forward. It wasn't disrespectful. But I asked my husband, he was like, well, so then his dad called and was like, yeah, my sister told me he left a note. I want to see the note. And I was like, okay. At that point, it was like, you know what? I'm not in this. I'm going to do what you asked me to do. And you'll have to deal with your feelings the way you deal with your feelings. And so I sent it, and it came across as angry. I think it was hurt. And I was like, you'll have, maybe, I've started therapy. Maybe you should start therapy. I had my oldest son start therapy because he turned to drinking and drugs because they were two peas in a pod. Their birthdays are 3 days apart. So they've always celebrated together. Even when they didn't have to anymore, it was like, no, they were the closest. So I told my ex, I was like, you still have one child left that you can get this right. And we have to be there for him. And so even that was a process because I had to let him grieve the way he grieves. And so I realized that they grieve different. His was turning to alcohol, and because he's an introvert, he didn't feel like he can talk to anybody. And so we ended up having to put him in rehab because I was like, I'm not going to bury not another kid. So you got to get it together because I need you here. And we literally just talked a couple of months ago for like 3 hours. That's the longest we talked in maybe 6 years. And he was like, you know what? I see what you were talking about when I was small, and I'm sorry. And he was able to tell me just, I was mad at you. Like, I really did not like you for what you did to me, and you put me in that place. But he was able to go to therapy and counseling and able to talk to somebody. He was like, because, we don't tell people our business, especially if they haven't, you don't know what I'm going through because you didn't lose your brother. And I was like, but these are trained professionals that are just going to give you tips and tools. They're not trying to get in your business. They're just trying to help. And so now even our relationship is better because he's been able to talk. I mean, he calls and I'm helping him with his dad because he's like, dad really wasn't there for us. And I was like, I don't quite know what to say. Like, if I say, yeah, I know, or if I say, oh, I was like, oh, that's how you feel? And he was like, yeah. And so all the stuff that you did, now I realize you were doing it because you wanted us to be close. And so now I'm helping him with his dad because he's trying to have a relationship, but he doesn't want to have a relationship where every time they meet, his younger brother comes into he just wants to be him. Yeah. So I was like, he's trying to parent me like I'm 12 and I'm 26. And I'm like, okay, so look, so I'm not learning therapy. Maybe write him a letter. So this way he gets it out so he can understand where you're coming from. Like, we all have to learn how to get along because what I've realized is while I'm not a huge fan, I love my kids. And so he gave me my kids and I still have to deal with him. because I still have a son. If my son decides to get married, we're both going to be at the wedding. If my son decides to have children, we're both going to be at the hospital. So I have to learn how to forgive people who have never apologized to me for what they've done to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the hardest thing.
Wow. Wow. And that, you know, I know that Mikko mentioned that her sister was there for her.
Mm-hmm.
Was there anybody that was there for you there, Lynette? Was there anyone that you felt that you could talk to? Because there's a lot of women out there that are in the same position as you. And I just want to know how you were able to speak to just one person about what you were going through.
I had a girlfriend, and I really didn't want to tell her because she was my girlfriend, but she was more my supervisor at work. And so now that she's not my supervisor, I don't work there at that particular department, and we're just the best of friends. Even she was like, I never knew. Like every day you came to work put together. And I was like, you know, I think I did it because if I showed it, if you saw it, you would ask me what was going on. And I just did not want to talk about it. So if I always dressed the part or looked the part, you would never ask me what was going on at home. And then I had an aunt who just passed away in December, more like my mom, Aunt Mama. She was just always one I could talk to. She'll always give me the spiritual advice, but she was like, look, if something, you need to leave. Like, let me know how bad it is and we're going to get you out. And I would just never tell her because I didn't want to be a burden. I knew it wasn't just me. If it was just me, it'd be like, okay, auntie, I need a place to stay for a month or two. But I have two boys. I have two boys that are in school. I have two boys. One, my youngest was challenged with asthma. You know, so it was like, that's a lot to put on somebody else's plate. It was a lot on my plate. And I was like, man, you know, I can handle it. I'll deal with it. And, you know, these are my kids. I got to do what I got to do. So I had those two. If I really needed them, they were there. I just was, I don't know if it was scared or I don't know if it was, I didn't want not so much judgment, but I told you so.
Okay.
Like, you shouldn't have messed with him. You know, I had people tell me, I don't like him, or you got to watch him. He's strange. Like, the way he does stuff, that's not, my aunt would say, that's not cute, you know, being obsessive and, you know, not wanting you to talk to any other dude. She was like, that's not cute. But again, I met him when I was 19 years old. So, you know, young and immature, thinking, oh my gosh, you're so much older, you don't know. Like, times have changed, and they had not.
Yeah. Doc, why do you think it's so hard for women in that situation to call on a friend about their situation that they're in? And how do women cross that line to do so?
It's because of what they have said. Society, we are all society. We're all part of society. Society assigns blame that you are weak and all the other things that hopefully we talking in part of this program is reaching out to decrease this stigma. They are afraid. They are embarrassed. They feel guilt. They feel they will be blamed. And sometimes the abuser has made it such that they even have stayed away from their friends. And sometimes those friends, not knowing what's going on, interpret it as they just don't want to be with us anymore. They think they have it all together. So it's a combination of all that makes it difficult to reach out. But we are appealing that if you are in that situation, reach out to somebody, your family doctor, your nurse, someone, and that's someone to also take it seriously. Because as they say, just because you are dressed well doesn't. Make sure that we believe it is important to you not there. If someone is dressed nice, has money, Hollywood, doesn't matter where, and say, something. Be alert. This comes to communication. When people are talking, let's be there. Let's be present, because it might be just a little something that is said. You know, it's not easy to come out, oh, I'm being beaten up, or I'm this, a little something. So that's why it is so difficult. Um, may I say something about the children, as you were talking about? You know, I have always worked we're all from Maryland, we find out, I've always worked in Baltimore, around Baltimore, and it just reminds me of the number of young, usually young African American men that I have seen after they have been released from prison, because I've always taken medical assistance. I say and a lot of them, I have actually apologized to some of them on behalf of my profession, to say, if somebody heard you long ago, okay, you needed help, not being behind those gates. And talk about the fact that the alcohol and drugs, I have said to many, at the time that you used, that was the best thing that prevented you from dying or somebody else dying.
Mm.
That was the only thing. And one of the questions I always ask someone who is chemically dependent, I said, what does it do for you? And they're surprised when I ask, because for many people, that was what saved them. That was what helped their stress. That was what, obviously, it's not helped anymore. And that brings us to society. Instead of just putting people in jail because of substance, let's find out what we can do to help them substitute it. Rehab, there are many people who are in rehab who genuinely want to stop. They can't unless the underlying issue that they are using to help is dealt with. So as you were talking, I was listening to it, that the children grew up and don't just look at anger, what is behind that anger. So we all, it has to be several facets of society.
Absolutely. Mikko, you're married now in a beautiful relationship, and also Lynette, were you scared in getting into a new relationship? Did you ever think, oh my God, what if it's going to turn out like this again? Were there moments that you felt like that? And was it hard for you to let go of the past to welcome the new? I'll start with Mikko.
Oh, it was really difficult. I actually just started writing this. Well, I'm in the editing phase and getting ready to put out my next book, and it's called A Single Mother's Map to Marriage.
Wow.
I'm telling you, that whole just letting my hair down and being transparent, and I'm thankful because my husband and I, we knew each other. We were friends for maybe 13 or 14 years before we dated.
Wow.
And he had already been around me for years through the music side when I was in the music industry. And so when we got together, I think he was he knew the music side of me, and like he was my music mentor and things like that, but he didn't really know like the other side of the abuse that I went through, and my past. So I had to be very open and honest with him. I'm like, this is what you're getting yourself into. I don't want to lie to you about anything. I want to be very open, very honest. And then I have 3 children. He didn't have any kids. I was very scared about that because I'm like, why would this man with no kids want to be around, these kids? But it was a tough transition for me. My kids, when they finally was able to meet him, because we dated for a long time before I felt comfortable to bring him around the kids and everything. And it was like, as soon as he came around, it was just like a click. And like, they were just like, oh, we love him. And I'm looking at them like, okay. But for me, it was tough because I honestly, I didn't think that I deserved to be in a relationship with anyone like my husband. He was a gentleman throughout our whole friendship. He was always the same, always a gentleman, always, very respectful. And then he was the total opposite, because I love thugs, I love drug dealers, I love guys who were like just the wrong men for me. So dating him was like a transition in itself for me, going from hood guys to very, polished and very nice and just not about that thug life. So it was like, for me, it was like mental training for me. Like, this person is not going to hurt me. He's not going to, treat me like the past people. So it was a tough transition for me, because bringing the kids into the situation, and that's what I'm talking about in my book, is like just being open to bringing somebody around, because it's scary, because you introduce somebody to your kids, they're thinking like, oh, okay. And then you don't know if they're going to really like the person. And so thankfully I didn't have to go through a phase of, because I'm gonna be honest with you, as soon as my kids was like, we don't like him, he would have to go, because my kids are, I'm just not going to bring anybody around. Even my friends, even just regular friends, I wouldn't even have friends. I wouldn't be friends with anybody that comes around and my kids are like, because kids pick up on things quickly. They'll tell you, they're honest, they're open and honest. So I was just, I was very blessed to be able to have that friendship with my husband first, and then to introduce him to my children, and for them to be like, okay, we cool, we rock with him, we like him. And so I've been very blessed. But yes, it was a very hard transition for me.
And you, Lynette?
It was hard. I think I was roughest on myself than anybody else. Like she said, I've known my husband forever. We met when we were just friends. We met our first job in 1988. We both got a job at Wild World. Well, it was Wild World back then. It's Six Flags now. We both started working in the funnel cake shop. So I've known him forever, and we literally walked into each other about 7 years ago, and we've been together since. But even getting to know him, back then we were kids. I was 15, 16 years old. So it's like, hey, what you been up to? We were Facebook friends, and he was like, yeah, I just retired from the Marine Corps. And I was like, oh, okay, nah, because I've already had that. I don't want that again. So I was like, oh, well, we'll always have Wild World. And just getting to know him, and I was like, well, what's the next stage of life look like? And he was like, I think I want to be a police officer. And I was like, oh, no, because my son has been in some trouble. So they have this stigma that the police, and I was like, oh, man, well, we'll always have funnel cake. I mean, but after I got to know him, it was like, man, he's not the Wild World kid. He's grown up. We both got married, and he has a daughter. And so I was like, well, I guess the kicker will be when you meet the boys. And so I told my oldest about him, and he's a go with the flow type dude. He was like, okay. And they hit it off. And I was like, I kind of expected that. That's not the kicker. So when I introduced him to my youngest, I was like, okay, so I've started dating, and I have somebody I want you to meet. And he was like, oh, okay. And his first question was, is he nice to you? And I was like, what? Okay. Like, kids don't ask. And I was like, he is very nice. And he was like, well, what does he do? I said, well, he retired from the military. He was like, I was like, I know. He was like, oh, so he just don't work? I was like, no, well, he's looking to be, a police officer. And he was like, and I was like, yeah, I know. So then when I introduced them, they got along. They were cordial. And I guess my son was like, oh, he's not bad. So my son was like, after the date, a couple of days, and I was like, well, what did you think? He was like, he's really cool. Like, I like him. And I was like, really? He was like, yeah, you didn't tell me that he wasn't Black, and he's a police officer. And I was like, well, I wanted you to handle that on your own. And he was like, no, like, I'm glad you didn't, because I would have already not liked him based on that, because I've had some issues, and I was like, oh, that was cool, and they got along great. And I would always ask my husband, like, why do you treat him? He said, because I was him. So I saw a lot of me in him, and he just needed guidance. He just needed somebody to tell him that it's okay, and we're going to work on it, and to love him through his mess. And I was like, wow. And so once he told me that, I wasn't as hard on myself, because I was like, man, I was always looking for, like, if, we're very both opinionated, and he was a drill instructor in the Marine Corps. So he is like here all the time. And I'm like, and so sometimes we would get into these discussions and he'd be like, no, you're not listening. And for me, it was like, okay, here we go. Here we go. I knew it. You just like the rest of them. And he was like, why are you acting like that? I was like, never mind, I'm good. And he was like, we were just having a discussion, but I had to learn, like, he's had to learn me, and I've had to learn certain things are triggers. And I automatically, when you start getting loud, I'm like, oh, he about to hit me. We're gonna get into it. And I had to learn how to retrain my mind that he is not them. And that took work. That took counseling for us. So I mean, we're good. He's never acted like he was gonna put his hands on me. He's just passionate. And then he's, for 20 some years, and now he's a police officer. So it's like he's used to barking orders at people. And so he had to find the balance that this is home. We don't have to bark. These are not Marines. These are not, so it took some getting used to. And I had to realize, okay, everything is not going to turn into a domestic issue.
Yeah.
But that took work. When that's all the relationships that you've had, that takes work to overcome.
We're gonna wrap up now, but it's been very emotional, insightful, and very impactful. I just love the two of you strength that you overcome this, and just for you to be so open with the people that are watching. A lot of people are really inspired by your story. But what advice, Mikko, would you give to that young girl that is having the signs and symptoms like Lynette was having? Push here, a little slap there, but I'm sorry, what advice would you give to that young person so that they don't go through what you did? And you even go into alcohol, to drugs and everything that you had to go through because of the relationship that you were in. What would your advice to be to those young women?
I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of Dr. Kankan. I would definitely say to tell somebody, to talk to somebody. I know it can be difficult because, for me, it was hard. I was grateful that I had my sister, but I think a lot of people, they don't want to be judged. They don't want to go through a whole bunch of questions. They just really need help. So I think for me, the number one thing is you have to look at the red flags, because another thing is I feel like I just kind of like went in with the mindset of, oh, well, he seems like he's cool, or he looks good, or he has money, or I went totally the wrong way about dealing with men or getting in relationships with men. So I would think the number one thing is, if they're red flags, don't take them lightly. If there is some verbal, like you don't like the way that his tone is with you or something, you have to follow those. You have to see those red flags, and you have to dismiss it as soon as it starts. You have to shut it down. Also, telling someone if you feel uncomfortable, maybe you don't even feel comfortable telling the person that you don't like the way that they're talking to you or interacting with you. Tell somebody else. You say, you know what? Let me run this past you. kind of don't like the way, be open and be honest with somebody. Have somebody that you can trust and that you can talk to and you can tell. My advice is to definitely look out for those red flags and also to talk to someone and tell someone, because you don't want to get yourself in a situation where there were red flags and you ignored them, and then you didn't tell somebody and you could have saved yourself. And that's what's happened to me in the past, of ignoring those red flags and then not telling somebody what was going on until the last minute. And it's at the point where I'm going to the hospital or I have a broken bone or something. And then they're like, well, wait a minute. I'm like, I know I kept it quiet. But for me, it is to make sure that you talk to somebody. If you're going through, anybody who's out there right now, if you're going through that situation, please talk to somebody. Please tell somebody. Get help, because you cannot do it on your own. That's my advice.
Absolutely. Lynette, what would your advice be to a young lady that's, facing the same thing that you're going through?
Mikko said it. Definitely talk to somebody. I know now, it didn't happen back in the day when I was going to doctors, but now I know that I've gone to the doctor a couple of times, and one of the questions they ask you is, do you feel safe at home? And I'm like, wow, I wish I had that question 20 some years ago. And it's funny because I'm like, yeah, but I can remember when, if asked that, I would have been like, no. So look out for red flags. Do not think that, you can make it better, that you can change someone else that's grown. Take what they say and what they do for face value. Find a friend or a family member, or, at this stage, young ladies are younger, go to the person at school, your guidance counselor or a teacher that you trust, and let them know that something's not right in your relationship or something's not right at home. Don't think that being physically or emotionally abused is okay. If it happens once, it will happen again. I know a lot of women are like, oh, he apologized. It won't happen again. It will. It will. It's a pattern. That's who that person is, male or female. Get out of that. Don't stay in that. Do not stay in that. Mentally and physically, it is not worth your health. Do not stay in that.
Did you ever keep on telling yourself, oh, he's going to change? Like he's made an effort today. Oh, he bought me flowers, or he bought me something. Oh, it looks like it's changing. And, Doc, do we ever get instances of when the men actually do change? Are there any stories that you can share of, that people have actually gone through this and they've come out together from the situation?
Yes, and I think Lynette is a poster child for great therapy, because as she said, it's work. It's just as much work as going to physical therapy is work. Going to counseling is, the counselor didn't give her all these tips. She worked through them. They are guiding you. And that's why she says it took a lot of work. And for the person to change, they would need to do all that work too. And as we've said, that abusers and abusee have some baggage to work through. And so someone just posted, should this be talked about in school? Yes, this is not just for the 30-somethings. Abuse starts teenage dating. Some people are already being abused, and some people are already living through abuse. So the message is, tell somebody, get help, professional help, and it can, this is not a gloomy, terrible story that there is no end to. There is help, is the message. There is help. If you know that I'm talking to the abuser yourself. If you know that you meant it, but you couldn't control yourself the next time that your spouse or your partner did something and something railed through you and you did that, go for help. There is help too for the abuser.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something going on in your life or something you've witnessed. So there is help also for that. And something else that both of you said, getting to know your current husbands. I hear we got to know each other. We were friends.
Yeah.
Sometimes people can't say that about the person they married. I love, they're not friends. You haven't got to know. So that's that we need to do that more for the dating period. Get to know each other, because the love is going to be warm and then life will start. And lastly, what I want to say is your son did not commit suicide. Your son died from suicide. Committing is a crime. That's from old European laws and practices. Your son died of a complication of a mind that could see light no further after they fought. So, he didn't commit suicide. He died of suicide, and I hope that healing continues for you.
Oh, wow. That helped a lot. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Mm, mm, mm. We've got some messages, just people just really appreciating all of you for opening up. Okay, George has got a question. Madam, what do you think really makes men especially abusive to their partners? Doc, do you have any?
Oh, okay. Oh, for me, okay. Like we've been saying, there are so many reasons, but abuse is about control. Those people, if there is the need to control, the need to almost see that partner as a possession. Just like children see a toy. Some children, you see the toy, I want my toy, and it's my toy. And that's how, and whatever the reasons that I've got there, whether some are from biologic, born with an illness, or it's what they have seen, it's got to, at that point, it's got to where they can't help it. By the time it gets to abuse, it's become a pattern, and see it as this person can't help it, but this person can go for help. And so if this person won't go for help, you can be the helper. So there are many reasons, not one reason for anyone. We've talked about maybe that's what they saw and it was okay for them. Maybe they're going through this, but it's not just because of alcohol. No, not because if only they stop drinking. So the bottom line is they have to go find out in resources where there are resources. Okay, but it's not for you to be the healer and lose your life or lose your sanity.
Absolutely. Guys, we are going to be wrapping up, but I'm going to give you 1 minute to ask your questions. So please send it in, or any comment that you have for the women before we go off. But Gladys says, why do men change from dating period to abusers after marriage?
In most cases, I think, just like we said, you see it as, you were looking at them with a certain lens. Okay. Lens of love, whatever the definition of what you thought love was. But those little things he said, and it could be saying men, it could be women too, but the little things your partner said, the little disrespect, when you were dating, now it just escalated, so the flags that we say that if he disrespected you in any way when you were dating, he hasn't changed. It's now marriage has become, now you are mine now. That's the mindset. You are mine now. Don't look at anybody, don't wear these clothes, don't do this, don't cut your hair this way. So this is what we're saying, that it was there, you just didn't see it.
Yeah. And, you know, I want your comment for this young 27-year-old that's been murdered by her husband. The pastor shot 7 times. Lynette, how does that story make you feel?
It was gut-wrenching to know that she had to die like that, and that she did not get help in time. That someone thought, or like Dr. Cam said, the control, that you thought you could control someone so much that you determined whether they lived or died, as opposed to, you know what, I just don't want to be with you anymore. Like, instead of just saying, you know what, I don't want to be with you anymore, but if I can't be with you, then no one can be with you. That control, and that she had to lose her like that, is gut-wrenching.
Did you know, because of the gun situation and the gun situation that you were faced with, did you think, God, that could have been me?
Absolutely.
That could have been me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't, when I hear of stories like that, I'm always thinking, again, I go back to, so what made me different than all these others? I mean, because that literally, I mean, he says, you know, oh no, it's not loaded, but we've already proven that one in the chamber, it only takes one. Yeah. That one, you could have been playing around thinking it was really empty, and actually shot me in my head. So every time I hear about someone being shot, it's like, okay, it's not funny. It's like, okay, God, there's purpose. I'm going to find out what it is. I'm going to keep doing this, but it is so not a game.
Yeah. Mikko, how does it make you feel hearing that story?
You know, I work with a lot of women who are getting out of abusive relationships, who are survivors, and every time I hear a story where a young woman loses her life, it just makes me feel like I have to keep telling my story. I have to keep talking, and I can't be silent about it, because I never know who it's going to help. I never know who is going to hear my story and say, you know what, if she can get out of that situation, I can do it too. So hearing that, it always makes me feel like I have a lot more work to do, that I really need to be more active on my social media, and, you know, even just trying to figure out a way of how to talk. Like this right here today, I'm just so grateful to be on here, to be able to share. And I just feel like more of us need to be talking about this every day, because for whatever reason, I feel like it's still taboo. Like some people just don't want to talk about it. They don't want to hear about it. So hearing that story, for me, it just makes me want to go harder and to keep talking and keep telling my story, to hopefully to help somebody else, to save someone's life.
Absolutely. I can't thank you guys enough. Someone says, Mikko, we're so grateful. Someone saying, you know, peace and blessing to both of you, and to our amazing doctor, who is 17. I just can't believe she's 17. She looks so glam.
Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous queen.
But I can't thank you guys enough. But, you know, we've had 2 amazing hours here, just, you know, sharing and pouring out information to people out there. Please, if you can put in the private chat your social media handles, just in case, you know, any woman wants to reach out to you guys, please, so I can share it. Or if there's any email that you want me to share, please send it in there so I can share it with people. But I think today has been amazing. Somebody says, what about women going through abuse? and their pastors tell them to keep praying. Doc, what do you think about that?
Well, since the 90s, I've been going to churches. I'm always grateful when a patient of mine says, "Oh, my church says, can you come and give a talk?" And in this period of Zoom, I think I've done 3, 4. So I would say it's encouraging that churches are now, more of them are realizing that you can pray and get help at the same time. It's not, they are not mutually exclusive. So the education still needs to be addressed to churches too, that it's not just pray. You don't say that when somebody has pneumonia. You tell them to see the doctor and pray that the doctor knows what they're doing.
Absolutely.
So it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So like Mika and Lynette said, we need to continue with the awareness.
Yeah. Are there any groups that you guys are in? Mikko, have you set up a group? Because you mentioned about helping other women. How do you go about doing that?
So I have a couple of groups that I'm in. I mean, I don't have my phone. Sorry, I wish I had my phone sitting here, but there are a couple of groups on Facebook that I'm a part of, and then my social media on Instagram, Mikko the Boss. I do a lot of speaking. I do a lot of I'm sorry. There's this thing that I do on Mondays called Mama Crushing Monday. And a lot of times I do talk a lot about domestic violence. I talk to survivors. And I also talk to just mothers in general, just different topics every Monday. So if you follow me on Instagram at Mikko the Boss, I do have Mama Crushing Mondays that we do every Monday. And it's pretty much dedicated to all things motherhood, but I also talk a lot about surviving abuse and different things in relationships.
Fantastic. And then we're going to be waiting for Lynette's book as well. Please let us know when that is out. We will share that. But
it's on Amazon.
Mikko's book is out, and so you can grab that. Love is not pain. .com. You can get her book, read about it, share it with people. Okay, brilliant, fantastic. We will grab one. I'm going to grab one. So it's on Amazon, right? It's on Amazon too?
Everywhere. I prefer you go to loveisnotpain.com because Amazon takes a percentage.
Yeah. Okay.
I love Amazon, but loveisnotpain.com is the best way to get it.
No, absolutely, absolutely. Any last few words, or are we good? We can now wrap up the show. We're good, Doc?
Okay, so thank you so much for sharing. Because I can tell you that next week I would go and I will hear a story from someone that I see, so these stories you sharing is helping someone. And Lynette saying how much help has helped you. Going to counseling didn't mean you are weak. Seeing a psychiatrist doesn't mean you are weak. And being abused doesn't mean you are weak. These things are happening. So thank you, and get help out there. Please get help. And we too, when people come, let's make sure we are hearing them. Thank you for sharing.
You so much. Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Lynette. Thank you, Mikko. Guys, I hope that you have truly been blessed by today's show. I've gotten a little teary during the show as well by, the women's amazing story and just their strength. I'm just so humbled and just so inspired by how they've been able to manage and deal with it, and also having children and just encouraging their children, and just what Lynette has been through. It's just extraordinary that she still has the voice to be able to speak and tell her story. God bless every woman that is going through this situation. May God guide them to come out of the situation so that they do not lose their lives. They do not die at the time that they're not supposed to die. That's not the way they're supposed to die. And so I pray that any woman that is going through this situation, please ask for help. Please call somebody. And make sure that if you're the one that they call, have a listening ear and listen well and give them the right advice so that they don't do the wrong thing. Guys, make sure that you share the pages and let people hear these amazing stories that will impact somebody's life. Sometimes also as teachers or whoever's watching, there could be children that are in schools that are having behavioral problems because they've got problems at home. And so let's all be careful in the way in which we treat people, the way in which we speak to people, because all of us are dealing with things in our own way. Some are abusive in the way they talk. The children may come out very abrupt, like, Lynette was saying, her child was just not listening. And so just imagine that he is probably seeing his mum getting beaten at home. And this is the way that he knows how to react. We are all not perfect, but we all can listen and also do the right thing. Let's encourage women. Let's not let society feel like they're shameful just because they come out of their marriage. No. You probably would not be able to stand one day in their shoe if it was you. Let's be more compassionate. Let's be more compassionate. Let's say no to violence. And let's stop another woman or a man from being hurt. Thank you all for watching the show. I will see you next time.